All right, all right. Happy Tuesday. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Alex Rubinstein. He is a journalist at the Gray Zone. Alex, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm sorry, I have two audios of you playing, but I'm ready to go.
All right, cool.
Woefully unprepared, but.
So there's a lot happening with this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. A couple days ago, I talked to everyone about the drone strike on the Kremlin that happened. Russia originally thought that it was Ukraine that did that, and then the next day they came back and said that they thought it was the U.S. government that was responsible for that. You actually had an article here called Ukrainian Banker Offers Cash for Drone Terror in Russia. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Can you tell us a little bit about the attack on the Kremlin?
Yeah, so actually, that was the second attempted assassination on President Putin. The first was a couple of weeks prior, where he was going to visit a manufacturing plant, and there was intel that the Ukrainian SBU, the Secret Service there, obtained that said that he was going to be there, and they attempted to fly a drone strapped with Canadian C4 manufactured C4 explosives. So that was the second attempted assassination. Whether Russia's saying it was Ukraine or the United States, I don't think that there's necessarily a contradiction there. I think that it's pretty obvious to anyone that they're working hand in glove, and even the targeting intelligence, a lot of it comes from the United States. There's reason to believe that approval is needed for this kind of thing. And afterwards, Secretary Blinken was asked by David Ignatius of the Washington Post whether the U.S. would criticize Ukraine for attacking inside Russian territory in relation to, I'm sorry, I've been trying to shut my phone off, in relation to this attempted assassination of Putin. And Blinken said it's up for Ukraine to decide how it wants to defend itself, again, in response to a question about attacks in Russia. So he essentially gave the green light from the highest perch of the U.S. government, of U.S. foreign policy. But that article, it's kind of about two things. It's one about this Ukrainian banker who is accused of basically taking money from the bank accounts of regular Ukrainian citizens and funneling it to Igor Kolomoisky, who is the main financial backer of Vladimir Zelensky and the Azov battalion. So he's been funding the war on the Donbass for the past 8 years. And he's going to be, I believe, on trial in September for those crimes. And then the bank that he was doing this through, ironically called Private Bank, it was made in the immediate aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was nationalized. And on the eve of its nationalization, he just withdrew billions more dollars and sent a bunch of it to his wife and daughter. Anyways, this guy, he's been on Ukrainian national television, organizing a competition to give $500,000 to any drone manufacturer that can attack the Victory Day celebrations on Red Square in Moscow. Those were, of course, today, so that didn't happen. He was unsuccessful, but I guess he gets to keep the money, so it's a win-win for him. So that's what half of the article was about, was this guy and this competition that he's having. The other half is about this Army of Drones campaign, which has raised millions of dollars, I think over $100 million for the purchase of drones for the Ukrainian armed forces and presumably the intelligence service. But that campaign, which has been The ambassador for that campaign is Mark Hamill, the actor who played Luke Skywalker way back when. Yeah, they're very good with the celebrity endorsements, but that campaign to raise money for drones has coincided with a ramping up of attacks inside Russian territory. And when I do articles like this, I try to be like, okay, let me make a list of all of the recent drone attacks inside Russian territory. That wasn't feasible. That would have taken like a week to do that. So I just kind of talked about how these campaigns are ramping up. Even the BBC, these attacks are ramping up. The BBC's reported it. They tried to talk to the guy who's running the campaign in Ukraine, the Ministry of whatever, I forget what it's called, who's managing this Army of Drones campaign about these attacks inside Russia, and he refused to comment. The BBC noted that he was, like everybody else in his government, refusing to comment on these attacks, but they are escalating. And there was one Telegram news channel in Russia that documented 10 attacks within the course of a day in a border region. So most of it's confined to these border regions, but there have been these few that have gone further and attacked civilian infrastructure and killed civilians.
So the drones that we saw, Fiorella Isabel, she actually posted a video footage of it on Twitter. From what I saw, I was kind of surprised. I was expecting to see something bigger, I think, or like larger, like drones or whatever. But this just looked like something that someone could just purchase at the store and just like fly theirself. But what I was wondering is like, considering the size of those drones, do you think that this could actually have done significant damage in reference to trying to assassinate Putin, for example?
Well, if it hit him in the head, yeah. but I think you make a really good point about the drones and why they're so effective is because you can buy a commercial drone for like $800, spend another, I don't know, $400, and I'm just putting out a number here because I don't know, on C4 explosives, and literally duct tape it to the drone, and then you just crash it and you have a big boom. I haven't looked closely enough at the video, and I'm not like an explosives expert to really be able to comment with any insight on that. But again, this is the second reported assassination attempt on Putin. The first one kind of flew under all of our radars, which is why I referenced it in my first article.
Now, I'm curious, is an act like this even allowed? Like, are they allowed to attack? Because I'm thinking about this. I'm like, wouldn't that be the equivalent to someone trying to attack the White House?
Right. Well, this is what I said when I was invited on Russia Today to talk about that, is that, could you imagine for a moment that Russia was giving supplies to Cuba to conduct bombings via drone in the area spanning from Florida to DC? Sure, mostly confined in Florida, but this attack that would have been equivalent on the White House would be totally unacceptable. Is it allowed? As they say, all is fair in love and war. But I think that it's escalatory and dangerous. And it's like when the Ukrainians did a suicide bombing of the Kerch Bridge all those months ago. I forget which month it was. Russia responded by attacking for the first time major infrastructure in Ukraine. They started taking out their electricity system. Russia has so far not made any attempts on the life of Zelensky. So this opens the door for that. Moreover, again, it was Canadian C4 explosives that were strapped to the first drone that tried to take out Putin. There have been reports of American Switchblade drones in the border region conducting these attacks. And you just have to imagine that all of these weapons that are flowing in from Western countries are going towards attacks in Russia. And if they're not, then they're filling a gap in Ukraine where they can put their own things into attacks on Russia. But there have been documented cases, again, with this first attempt on Putin, with Canadian-made C4 explosives. So, it really is almost a declaration of war. And I think that Russia is smart enough not to respond tit for tat like that. But if it were, if it were Cuba being armed to do this, Cuba would be obliterated overnight. You have to almost respect the restraint that's going on here.
Do you feel like this is another excuse for the U.S. government to give Ukraine more aid?
Well, they gave them more aid today.
Yeah.
So I don't think they need any excuse at this point. I don't know. There's a potential that the drone attack on the Kremlin was meant to provoke a response that would provoke more aid. But that's like a level of three-dimensional chess that I don't know if that's really going on here. The aid's just going to keep flowing in. No matter what they say, that the aid will dry up if the counteroffensive is not effective. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll have to see. But I think that again, I'm sure you've been saying this. We at the Gray Zone have been saying this since the beginning: is that they're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. So I don't think they need an excuse to continue arming.
Right. And I want to reiterate to people like what that really means. That means until the last Ukrainian, until everyone is dead. So I don't see a way for Ukraine to win this conflict. So this incident happened with the attack on the Kremlin, which pushes Russia and Ukraine obviously further away from any type of peace negotiations, I would assume at this point. We found out from those leaked documents from the Pentagon that there was actually no plan to try to resolve this conflict with Russia and Ukraine at all this year. That's what we found out from those documents that came through. So when you look at the meeting that Xi Jinping had with Putin, where they were trying to talk about some type of peace negotiations, where do you feel that stands now, considering what just happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I've been called a Ukraine expert, but I wouldn't consider myself one. I just kind of find stories and latch onto them. But it definitely changes my presumptions about how this could end. There was a time when, I think myself and many others were of the view that Ukraine might be partitioned like Berlin was, right? But now you have these constant drone attacks. You have 2 car bombings inside Russian territory, a bombing against Russian intellectuals, a bombing attack at a public event at a cafe in St. Petersburg, and the war is coming inside of Russia. And so this idea that you can just have a wall of separation, that doesn't really work anymore. And I don't think that kind of stalemate would be tenable to people in Russia, because you have it's inside of their territory now. And so I almost wonder, and I hope it's not the case, whether this will end until Kiev falls. And because there have been also a number of even more far-right forces than Zelensky that have basically wanted a war since 2014, so that they could be the strongest guys there and take power. So short of an actual regime change in Kiev, I don't see how this ends, because I don't think that the weapons are going to dry up, but the bodies might, so there's that too.
And there's also this information that we found out from the Pentagon document leaks, that the goal for the United States government with this war is to implement regime change in Russia to get Putin out of there, basically.
That was in the documents? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that information was revealed too. So it's like, do you think that will actually happen? And if that doesn't happen,
Not a
what?
chance in hell. No, I don't think that will happen. I mean, China doesn't want Russia to fall. Russia, while it has, NATO on its border, there's also Belarus and other places that would not allow for that to happen. I don't think that the Russian government is nearly as fragile as we're led to believe. In fact, I think inversely, our government is much more fragile than we're led to believe. So, I think it's more likely that Biden would be a one-term president than Putin would be deposed somehow.
No, I totally hear you there. Another report that came through was the corporations that have decided to set up shop in Ukraine. So I don't know if you heard, but BlackRock, apparently, one of those
Right.
corporations, Zelensky actually bragged about this in a video. I noticed that. And so now that they kind of have this partnership, so to speak, with a company as large and as powerful as BlackRock, what do you feel that can mean the future for Ukraine? Because one of the things that I'm predicting, if this war continues to drag on and they do want to fight to the last Ukrainian, I feel that Ukraine's economy is going to be ruined at the end of this.
Yeah, not just their economy, but their infrastructure, all of their buildings, everything is going to be ruined, which is the perfect time to buy, as they say. I did a story. Again, I can't give a month for it because I forget, but I did a story where Zelensky rang the New York Stock Exchange bell one morning, and that was the message that was put out was basically, buy Ukraine. You can own it, and it has been owned for a long time. But that stock exchange event which he did remotely, it coincided with the launch of an initiative to invest in Ukraine. And I forget what the initiative is called because, again, this has been a while now. But it had major backing from the beginning from companies like Google and Microsoft, all these big tech firms, some of the most valuable companies in the world, all of which pulled out of Russia, of course. But it had initial backing from them, and there is good information out there about the buying up of Ukraine as a country. But again, this is a country that's also been largely bought up before. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, $32 billion of weapons went missing, for one. And then you have guys like Igor Kolomoisky founding Private Bank, which is now nationalized, and just stealing money from regular people, and just going directly into their bank accounts. So this is the bastard child of Europe. Go back a few years in the news and look up indexes of the most corrupt countries in the world, and Ukraine will be in the top 5 in all of those lists, because it's just been owned by the international capitalist class and people with ties to Washington, and these are the guys who again stole money from regular people to fund this war in the Donbass for the past 8 years, and now after the war, it's going to be it's just people are going to have nothing, and they won't be happy, and the only happy people will be the people in Silicon Valley, and Wall Street.
That's right. There's a lot of money to be made here. People have to understand that. Now, today is an interesting day. Today is technically Russia Victory Day, but I did read somewhere that there was controversy over that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can try. So it's not just Victory Day in Russia; it's Victory Day all over the world, and it is the anniversary of the surrender of Nazi Germany. So, I think that probably all of your viewers know the incredible amount of losses that the Soviet Union experienced. 25 million of its people. I think the U.S. was somewhere close to 8 million. During the or maybe 800,000. I don't want to put a number out there because I haven't brushed up on that, but significantly larger losses in the Soviet Union. You go back to, I was listening to Mark the Day to Tear the Fascists Down by Woody Guthrie, and it was incredible that at the time you could hear popular American musicians thank the Soviet Red Army and the Chinese for fighting fascism. And vowing American support for their cause. I think I saw something in the news about Zelensky trying to reclaim it and rename the day. I forget what the name that he picked was, but it's so hilarious that a government that honors its Nazi collaborators so vehemently, naming streets after them, giving them national hero awards. And just openly idolizing them. Zelensky himself has commented favorably about Stepan Bandera, who killed hundreds of thousands of Jews and communists and other unwanted people. Zelensky himself has commended him. So it's funny to see that a government that honors its Nazi collaborators is also trying to claim some kind of role in the defeat of Nazism. It's the ultimate irony.
That's right. And one of the things that was interesting to me too is the celebrities. So like Mark Hamill, for the younger people in the chat who don't know, Mark Hamill, he's best known for playing Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, like the original Star Wars, not the reboots, although he's in one of them. But
yeah, he drank like this. He's like all raggedy in the new one, and he's like drinking walrus milk, and it looks just like absolutely disgusting in his beard and stuff. It's hilarious. I've tweeted that picture at him a few times when he's just like, when I want to get under his skin because he's not proud of those movies, the new ones.
I know. Yeah, for like people that like, I'm a big like Star Wars fan, so like for me it was really disappointing to see someone like Mark Hamill. I'm like, oh my god, like he drank the Kool-Aid too. And it's not just him, but like I don't know if you saw this as well, but Orlando Bloom actually went and met with Zelensky. I'm like, what are you doing? Yes.
Yeah, and Bono uploaded a photo of him to a free online photo editor, and he got it on the cover of The Atlantic somehow. But there's actually a great, interesting clip of Zelensky's former press secretary or some kind of equivalent role at the CSIS think tank, where she is talking about how it was like an intentional strategy to celebritize Zelensky, and this whole war has been marked by celebrity endorsements. It's like those old Aid concerts that they had, where I'm reminded of an album called "Pictures of Starving Children Sell Albums." By what was that band? Chumbawamba. But yeah, right away, you saw Paul McCartney on stage with a Ukrainian flag guitar. John Bon Jovi's on board. Like all the big name classic rockers, with the exception of Eric Clapton and Roger Waters, of course. And then, I did a story where Jon Stewart gave an award to a Azov battalion neo-Nazi who has a Sonnenrad tattoo on his arm. It's just, I think that, part of it's to stay relevant, really, because I think people are like a lot less invested in what elite celebrities have to say.
Yeah, it's true. When I was growing up, there were a lot of concerts. I don't see these as much anymore, but there were a lot for Africa. So for
Yeah,
people who are familiar, like the video "We Are the World,"
right.
that was aid for Africa. I think also Queen also did some kind of concert. I think was also aid for
Yeah.
Africa. Like that was a big thing. Like when I was growing up, you would see like those kinds of shows, and then it just kind of went away. And now I feel like now it's all about Ukraine. And it's not just, actors and musicians, even the NFL has gotten in on this. Like there was, propaganda about it during the Super Bowl. It's all over the place. And I feel like a lot of Americans just don't understand the full story. Has that been your perspective like recently, or do you feel like more people are starting to wake up and understand that this is not all just Russia's fault?
Well, I don't live in the United States, so it's hard to get a sense of the average person's feeling because the most interaction I have with people outside of my family and social circles uh, is on Twitter, which I don't think is like a very good sample. But I don't think that it's a coincidence that the most popular TV news host in the country was the only one putting out a critical perspective on this. I think that there is a hunger for points of view that don't conform to the nonsense that, frankly, that we are fed. I mean, and it also, I don't know how easy it might be to convince people. But what I would say is that there's been this incredible cynicism from the media class because for years, most of the reporting about Ukraine was like very critical. I mean, you have the corruption issue that I talked about. You go to Radio Free Europe. You go to Bellingcat. You go to the BBC, Vice News. All of these outlets, every outlet was reporting on this Nazi problem for years. For years. I mean, I used to consume that stuff voraciously because I thought it was fascinating and I thought it was a massive scandal. Even somebody like Ro Khanna thought it was a massive scandal and tried to stop U.S. support for Azov. He's, of course, backtracked and ignored that issue. But it shows the incredible cynicism, and it shows what the people, the journalists, really think of their audiences, of the average American person, where they can do that kind of overnight about face, go from reporting nonstop about this Nazi problem, about this corruption problem, and then tell their readers, the next day that that Ukraine is a beacon of democracy and liberal values, and offer no explanation whatsoever on what caused that transition. It's and just do this thing that they always do, where it's like Putin is an evil dictator, and that's all you need to know. So it really just shows what they think of the average American. And Tucker, for all his flaws, treated his audience with respect.
Yeah, it's there was a letter that was written back in 2018. For those who are not aware, I showed it on here before, but it's been a while. Ro Khanna co-signed this. Other congressmen and congresswomen signed that letter. Hakeem Jeffries was one of them who signed that
right?
letter, by the way.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he was on there, and basically calling out the concern about the Nazi problem, not just in Ukraine, but they also mentioned Poland as well. And now it's like, it's unfortunate because I saw that letter after I interviewed Ro Khanna. And had I seen that letter before, I would have asked him, like, why are you retracting your statement when you co-signed this letter saying that it was a problem in 2018? But then you also have to remember who was president at that time. Donald Trump was. And so we notice how some of these so-called progressives, we call them regressives on this show, they were really willing to push back when Trump was in office. But the moment that Trump lost and Biden won, they seem to just go along with the flow. And these are things that we're trying to point out more and more.
Yeah, I mean, there's this tendency of progressives in Washington to present themselves as like the vanguard of critical foreign policy thought, but only ever pushing on issues which are basically so disgusting that like it's like a free win for them, because there's no industry or community, think tank community that's really willing to attack their character for their advocacy on these issues. So you have somebody like Ro Khanna, who spent years and I think did a service to people here and people in the affected country on Yemen. And so he was a good advocate against U.S. involvement in the Saudi war in Yemen. But that's like the extent of it. Like that's where it ends, right? It doesn't. You don't go any further than that on like challenging American foreign policy, and they never do. In fact, I actually reported a few years ago on a conference in Washington that Ro Khanna spoke at. And it was a conference on religious freedom, but really what it was trying to use that issue as like a cudgel against China to, push for regime change and push for a religious community anti-Chinese coalition. And it was sponsored not just by the Christian far right, many organizations within that sphere, but also the Church of Scientology, also Falun Gong. And you have people like Nancy Pelosi speaking there. You had Mike Pompeo there. You had Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley. I'm sorry, maybe not Tom Cotton. Maybe he was there. I forget, because it's been a few years. And then you have Ro Khanna, and Ro Khanna shows up at this freak show, and like gives like his stump speech on Yemen, and it's like, dude, why are you here? What are you doing? So I've never really had a whole lot of respect for those kinds of people who basically, I think, ride on the coattails of the people who are actually broadening the conversation around foreign policy. People like you, people like the Gray Zone, Jimmy Dore, Tucker Carlson. So I think that they're at the end of the convoy.
Yeah, I wonder, do you get a lot of pushback sometimes for writing for the Gray Zone? Because I know there have been a couple of times, particularly with this conflict with Russia and Ukraine, where Max and Aaron were uninvited to events because of their message with Russia and Ukraine. It's just ridiculous. But
yeah, I mean, it was Zelensky's wife who had them disinvited from a tech event in Lisbon. Yeah. But I don't get invited to stuff anyways. So no, I haven't had that. I don't really do podcasts or anything, so I don't really talk to people that are like influential in alternative media. It's just not my thing. So I haven't faced that. What I do get is the barrage of NAFO trolls, because I did a few articles on them, and I actually have information that I meant to get out back in October, but it never happened, and I'm still kind of sitting on it. And just like, there's, after a certain point, you don't want to give them any more air. So I don't know if they're like really relevant anymore. So I haven't put that information out. But if they do something again to make themselves like actually seem kind of relevant, I'll put that info out. But yeah, that's it. I just, and it was funny too when Twitter got taken over by Elon Musk. The verify tab used to be like empty for me because I never had any like other blue checks like boosting me, and then all of a sudden overnight, like my verified tab is unreadable, totally spammed with NAFO accounts that have 68 followers. So
they're quick too. So like I tweeted this out like earlier before we went live, and boom, already there was one that commented, and I was like, wow, you guys are fast, right? So as soon as like whenever I get them, I just block them instantly. I'm like, bye.
Yeah, I decided not to do that just because I felt like if I was writing about them, it kind of showed weakness on my part, and then also it kind of proved my point. If like everything I tweeted had like 40 NAFO trolls like trying to like spam it, kind of like made my argument for me. And then also like the time it takes for me to like block all of them is significantly less than the time it takes all of them to like spam me. So,
point.
You know, I didn't block them, but yeah, I mean that's like the extent of it. I mean, I used to have back in the day when I would write about Syria, you know, other journalists that would attack me. But I don't even get that anymore. Now the only thing I get from other journalists is like them trying to pass off my work as their own.
Oh no.
You know, yeah, it happens. That's fine. I had like 4 outlets that like that covered my Jon Stewart story and like didn't say my name or the outlet I was writing for. It was, so, you know, it is what it is. It's kind of my fault because I don't really like go on camera a lot or like tweet like all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm happy with the knowledge that like the information that I've been putting out through the gray zone since the launch of Russia's military operation has, I feel, changed the conversation in many ways and opened the doors, particularly the first one that Max and I co-wrote in the days after the invasion about Zelensky and how he basically lost his battle against the neo-Nazis and started collaborating with them.
Yeah. Because I've received a lot of my information in reference to this conflict from Gray Zone or people like Lee Camp. Like that's where I've seen antiwar.com. That's
yeah, they do great work there.
Yeah.
So do you get a lot of backlash for kind of endorsing these narratives or engaging with them?
Yes, you know, so in reference to Twitter, so to speak, like I made a habit out of not looking at my mentions.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. Yeah.
That's part of the reason. And then sometimes I do get the emails from people where they're just like, oh, you're a Putin puppet. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know where that's coming from, but whatever.
Right.
You know, to me, there's 2 sides to a story. And I feel like with mainstream media, particularly in the United States, that is not the case anymore. Not anytime you're talking about not just war, but even electoral politics, I feel like it's just very one-sided. So everybody knows CNN is the liberal outlet, Fox News is the conservative outlet, and anything outside of that, it's like you have to seek out independent media. And then even sometimes in independent media, it's like if they're bought off, then their narrative may be skewed too and may lean more towards the mainstream media narrative. So,
well, and you look at those people's histories too, and you see that, you know, they've been not consistent to say the least, you know, and so how they blew up in leftist social media is kind of, it's beyond me. I don't really understand it because again, look at what they were saying about Putin in 2018, you know?
Right.
But it's funny because, you know, again, like when I used to write about Syria and stuff, I'd have people that like, you know, people at established institutions, even people in alternative media that would attack me because it was kind of marginal, right? It was easy to attack at that time because there wasn't this like critical mass of people on the internet that really understood what happened there. Here with Ukraine, it's totally different. And so they're better off rather than trying to marginalize people like us. They just ignore us because they don't want to open up their followers to the information that we are putting out. So it's pretty sad, but it's also a sign of their declining relevancy and ours only, you know, increasing.
Have you ever been invited onto mainstream media to talk about your journalism?
No, I've never been invited on mainstream media. I did have an offer to do op-eds from Business Insider, which I took, and then they refused to run my first piece and then canceled our contract. I've never been invited on any of the prominent alternative media outlets either, so that's fine. I'm not like the kind of guy that like needs to be the center of attention. I don't really, like to be on camera that much. It's totally fine with me. I wish that when they covered my stories, they'd say my name. That's about it. But other than that, I don't really care. And you know what? I don't like talker. Like I never had respect for. I shouldn't say I never had respect for it, but I do. I like to think I do something that's very different from what podcasters or that kind of thing is. And I do investigative journalism, and I don't mean disrespect towards people who do that, but it's something that's very different, and it's not really what I want to do.
It is very different. I have one more question for you, Alex. I've actually been asking everyone that comes on recently that is independent journalist or commentator, what advice would you give to someone who is considering, doing what you do, becoming an investigative journalist?
Do we have a few minutes for this response?
We do. Go ahead.
So
some people said like one thing. Some people said, I can tell you this. So far, I've asked this question to like maybe 10 or 11 different people. No one has said the same thing.
Okay. So when I got started, I was not doing investigative journalism. I was actually like a protest reporter. I was going into the streets this is like 2014 through maybe 2017, and doing all the social movement protest coverage, Black Lives Matter, Standing Rock, Charlottesville. I was at all of these things, and working tirelessly. I used to, work my, 9 to 5, and then after that I'd go and cover stuff in Washington, D.C., and then on the weekends do the same. And so I built an audience that way, but now I do something which is very different. But I think that the same thing kind of applies. I used to tell people, go to events with your phone and film it, and ask people questions. Now, what I would tell people is if they wanted to do investigative reporting is to read the news all the time. The mainstream media, not alt media. Again, no offense to anyone in alt media. But there is significantly more information to be found in the mainstream media, both truthful and not. And you have today this incredible platform called Substack, and you can just like I did my own video journalism on Twitter, you can do your own investigative journalism on Substack. Tweet at people who you like. Tweet them your articles, and again, try to like read. There's a problem with that people have that write in alternative media where they don't really know how to write a news article. So like read the news like all the time, not just for the news, but for like an understanding of how to put a piece together. And if you put things out consistently, which I don't, you will find an audience for that. And again, just share it on Twitter, send it to your favorite writers. People will notice you. So that's what I'd say. Was that different from what everyone else has said?
Yes, it was different. It's amazing to me. Like no one has said the same answer so far. I'm really surprised by that. But yeah, like I 100% agree. I always tell people like don't quit your day job just yet.
Yeah, don't do that. But there's like this like leftist mantra that like if you want to like be able to understand the world, you need to read theory. And I always tell people, don't read theory. Like maybe like a few things, sure, but read the news. Like really, just read the news. There's what I use is an RSS program, which is like an old school, early internet kind of technology that you plug in different sources, and you can look this up, RSS, and you get everything that they publish in one place. So I use that, and I've used that many times throughout my career, and it gives you kind of a bird's eye view of the news. and you see something that like looks kind of like suspicious, or like or you see that everybody's talking about the same issue, kind of in a decentralized way. And so that's like an opening to go in and look at that suspicious article, that suspicious headline, find the truth of it. Or if it's like this, like all of a sudden overnight like campaign by all these different media outlets covering the same issue, find the truth of that situation and put that out there. That's what I would say.
Awesome. All right, Alex, before you go, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, Twitter at RealAlexRuby, that's R-U-B-I, realalexruby.substack.com. That's my free newsletter where I just put out previews of everything that I'm doing for the Gray Zone. So you can like get, a free email to see that I have a new article up, and just keep tabs that way. And of course, the Gray Zone.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are doing great work over there. Alex, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.